Jai Hind, Namaste, hello and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav and in this video we'll be discussing the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 27th of October 2020. Now for your convenience, I have added timestamps in the description. So if you want to skip to a particular news, please use those timestamps. Also, to get free PDFs of selected topics, you can join my Telegram channel, the link to which is also in the description. Also, if you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel and please press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new video that I post. And please give us a thumbs up if you like this video. So without wasting your time, let's get started. Starting with the Hindu, hope rises for COVID Oxford vaccine. So this is basically about the AstraZeneca vaccine. So they have come out with a new press release. So they have said that this vaccine has evoked the similar immunogenicity response in older population as it did in the younger population. So this is particularly a good news considering the fact that old people are more susceptible to die because of this disease. So let us see what they're saying. So as per the latest report, immunogenicity response was similar to older and younger adults, and that reactogenicity was lower in older adults. Now immunogenicity means that when you inject an antigen is a substance that can cause disease, right? So the kind of immune system or the ability of that antigen to evoke immune response in your body is known as immunogenicity, and reactogenicity means that common side effects of vaccines. So it was good that immunogenicity response was high and reactogenicity was low. This is positive because immune system weakens with age and older people are most at risk of dying with the virus. The results further build the body of evidence for the safety and immunogenicity of AZD1222. Now about the vaccine called AZD1222 or CHADOX1nCoV19, the viral vector vaccine. This viral vector is the antigen which is injected into the body, and this is basically a weakened version of common cold virus that causes infection in chimpanzees. This is known as adenovirus. If you remember, I've told you that many vaccines are being designed on the platform of adenovirus. So in this case, this is the antigen, right? And it is evoking high immunogenicity and low reactogenicity. Just the headline, Center promises law to check stubble burning. So Center has submitted in the Supreme Court that they're going to form a law to deal with this problem of stubble burning. Basically, Supreme Court had decided to form a single man community under Justice Madan B. Lokor to combat this stubble burning. It had plans like recruiting volunteers from NCC, NSS and Scouts and Guides to check the stubble burning. So now Supreme Court has put that on hold because Center has promised that they will be coming out with a new law. Then India to sign geo-spatial cooperation deal with US. This is about BECA, right? We have discussed how BECA will give us access to sensitive satellite information that will increase the accuracy of our guided missiles and armed drones, right? So again, we'll be discussing it tomorrow or day after when they finally sign it. So there's no point in discussing it again and again. We've already discussed this in detail. BECA, COMCASA and LEMOA, we have discussed all the three agreements. Then page 6, the president who called a spade. If you want to read it, you can read it. I had told you earlier as well, this person, Harish Khare, he is unnecessarily obsessed with Mr. Narendra Modi. He always drags his name in anything he writes. So here again, he's talking about Mr. K.R. Narayanan, then he's dragging Mr. Narendra Modi. Not that I support any of them. I'm just telling you that this person is biased. That is why I never read his articles. And please, 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 students, if it's there in the newspaper does not mean that you have to read it. You have to read only the relevant things in the newspaper. Please get rid of this habit of reading it end to end. And one more thing, please get it out of your head that you have to read your newspaper in the morning. No. Your morning time is your most productive time. You invest that time into your optional or your GS. Please reserve your evening time when you're least productive for newspaper, because newspaper has so much of information that you won't be able to carry it for so long. So you keep your least productive time for your newspaper preparation and your most productive time, especially the morning. See, you are not a middle class man, just living his life and going through the motions. So you're reading the newspaper in the morning. No, you read your newspaper when you're least productive, in the afternoon or in the evening. And it's not because I release videos later on. This is what is the genuine advice to you. It's your wish, whosoever you want to follow and whose video you want to follow, and you should choose what is best for you. But I am just telling you, whatever channel you watch, please try to make it a point that you do it in the evening or when you're least productive. Please reserve your mornings for your best preparation, and that is for your static portion and your optional. Now this shade of grey, this is about the FATF. Again, we have discussed Pakistan has 4 months till February, till the next plenary. It has to take actions again, 21 out of 27. The 6 most important points it did not take action. So he's just blabbering about that only. Then contesting neighbours, revised geopolitical playbook. This is a good editorial. We will be discussing this. So let us begin with it. So this editorial is basically about how the pragmatism in foreign policy has taken over ideology for both India and China in West Asian region. And I've been telling you time and again, when it comes to foreign policy, pragmatism always triumphs idealism. It was back in 1990s or in the previous era when idealism used to play a role. Even in that idealism or ideology, there was some pragmatic consideration. For example, India starting the non-alignment movement, it was not just some ideological concept. There were many practical reasons behind it, and it actually paid dividends to us in the long run. So now this one is telling us about how India and China are recalibrating their policies here. It begins with the background that 2020 has been a very radical year in terms of India-China relationships. Then he tells us about strategy autonomy, not non-alignment. So India has changed its policy that it aligns with different powers or countries based on its interest or issues and not ideological. Like earlier it was NAM where we were bound by ideology. Now we go for interest-based alignments, right? Now this is very important because we have been recalibrating our relationships in the region. Our relationship with Saudi, Israel, UAE, Qatar, countries like that has become stronger at the cost of weakening relationship with Iran. Behind that is also a very strong reason that this region in particular is going to have a very stable economic growth in the future, right? And because of the stability that is going to usher in because of the Abraham Accords, it is a better deal for us. Not that we are ignoring Iran, but we had to follow some US diktats in terms of the sanctions that they had imposed. And because of that, our policy sort of experienced a setback in Iran. If you remember, a $400 billion 25-year deal between China and Iran. But if you remember day before yesterday, I told you how US is gonna give us leeway in terms of development of Chabar port. So that is opening our path again for large engagement with Iran. And there's probably going to be a change within the US administration. So if Biden comes to power, then we can hope to have better relations with Iran. Now again, getting back to it. Now he's talking about India and China in West Asia. Both employed similar versions of non-aligned thinking in West Asia. We had equitable engagement. There are 3 poles of power in West Asia: Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel. So we had good relations with all 3 of them without getting into their entanglements. And at one point, we were also considering an importers OPEC. Like OPEC is the body that is comprising of the oil exporters, and they look after the interests of oil exporters, like how to manage supply. Whenever there are price shocks, they manage supplies and all that. So we were also thinking of making an importers OPEC so that we could put forward the interest of major oil importers. But that has changed since 2014. India's outreach to West Asia sharpened since 2014. India doubled down on its relations with like of Abu Dhabi and Riyadh, open economic and political preference to the larger Gulf region because of economies, and they are looking to recalibrate their economies. There are many opportunities for India. While engagements with Israel move steadily, Iran lagged behind because of US sanctions. This in turn significantly slowed the pace of India-Iran engagements. China's overtures have been steadily more adventurous as it realizes 2 major shifts that have taken place in West Asia. Now there are 2 major shifts. Number 1, the West Asian countries have progressively come to realize that American security safety net is not absolute and they need to invest more in others. So that is why they are going for deals with Israel, and China is also looking for an opportunity in this. And second, Gulf economies, though they are attempting to shift from the petrodollar economic model, but they still would need an oil market, right, to basically support them during this transition from petrodollar economy to an economy supported by manufacturing and services. So for that, they need big markets, and China and India are big markets. So China sees opportunities here. So that is why there has been sharp contrast. China signed a $400 billion 25-year understanding with Iran. Now the details are not out in the public domain. They were just in the news. China is no longer happy to play a passive role through concepts like negative peace, that is not doing anything, and peace through development. Now they want to be actively engaged in this region by providing an alternative model or investment and influence. What they follow, BRI projects. So they are trying to implement something similar in the West Asian region. But New Delhi, it understands the economic realities of the region. So our policy again is pragmatic. We know that despite entanglements in Yemen war and general tensions between Gulf states and Iran, the likes of Saudi, UAE and so on have maintained relatively strong and stable economic progression. And that is what really matters to us, right? So we would want to have better relations with them. Similarly, Israel's recent peace accords with UAE and Bahrain add much further weight towards a more stable Gulf region. So the stable the Gulf region, better it is for us. Why? More trade, right? More remittance, because a large Indian population lives in the Gulf region and they send remittances. So the stable the Gulf region, the better it is for us. And now that the two arch enemies of the three poles power in West Asia are coming together, then it is a very big opportunity for us. So that is why it seems like we are putting more effort on this relationship. But we are also trying to revive our relationship with Iran. Like I said, we have also maintaining pressure on the US to give us leeway for our projects with respect to Iran. So he concludes by saying that this theory of interest superseding ideology in foreign policy is fast unraveling practically, both for India and China. So India is also changing its stance from greater cooperation with Iran. We are somewhat shifting towards the Gulf Arabic countries and Israel, right? And China is looking towards Iran and it is looking for opportunities there, and it is trying to be more radically involved in the region. So that is all that this editorial is saying. Cleaning the air. So I think we are going to discuss this fourth or fifth time. This is again about the statement by Trump that the air in India is filthy, right? So we discuss how India has the worst or the most exposure to PM 2.5, right? It was something around 83 microgram per centimeter cube, which is more than 10 times the concentration or the exposure in low pollution countries, right? We have discussed all of this. Then India is the third country when it comes to exposure to ozone, and this was all in the SOGA reports, right? So this is also telling us about that only. One or two more points, so we'll just quickly look at it. So SOGA report, highest PM 2.5 and third highest ozone. Center was in denial mode. Our environment minister, he said last year that no Indian study on such a correlation was available. That view has been challenged and WHO has expressed worry. Now important points. Now there is an added dimension of COVID-19 infection today. We have discussed it that COVID-19 plus air pollution would make problems worse. So you can quote this. Now I'm telling you the name. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health has contended that a 1 microgram rise in PM 2.5 is associated with 8% increase in the death rate due to novel coronavirus based on long-term exposure data in the US. So if he's basing that on the terms of data exposure in US, so imagine what the conditions would be like in India, because our pollution level in terms of PM 2.5 is way much higher. And we have also discussed about particles which are smaller than PM 2.5 and they're even more dangerous, right? And they are about 40 to 60% in air pollution in big cities, right? Now, India is seeking to address its chronic air quality crisis partly by raising emission standards and fuel. The country adopted BS6. So basically, we went from BS4 to BS6. We skipped BS5. The national air quality standard for annual average of PM 2.5 is 40 microgram per cubic meter, which is 4 times the WHO limit. So already our annual average is 4 times the WHO limit. So this is just cutting our life expectancy and increasing the death rate, because it is going to create problem with coronavirus, right? So this is about it. Then page 7, the many lessons from COVID-19. This is an editorial by Soumya Swaminathan, who is the chief scientist at WHO, and she has made some very good points. So let us discuss this. Now she tells us about certain things in this editorial. First, she tells us about the gender impact of COVID-19. Then we'll also get to know about the impact on children. Then she talks about the need for gendered analysis and what are the problems in that. Then she also tells us about disruptions in health services because of COVID-19. Then she introduces us to a concept called coverage index and why it is important. And then finally, she tells us that what can we do better. So let us look at it. So first she tells that over the last 9-10 months, the most important lesson that she has learned is the significance of investing in public health and primary healthcare, because the countries that invested in them over the past a decade or two, now they are reaping the benefits. Another lesson is positive role of science and scientists. Then talking about the gender impact, now there could be 60% more maternal deaths because interventions like uterotrotics, antibiotics and clean birth environments are no longer available. There has also been a surge in domestic violence and it has been well documented. Then she also says that many women have lost work and livelihoods because more women than men work in the informal economy and their income fell by over 60% during the first month of the pandemic. And then the number of women and girls living in extreme poverty is expected to increase from 87 million to 100 million. So these are very worrisome figures. Then about the impact on children, that the prevalence of wasting could increase by 10 to 50%. We have already suffering from this problem and we have discussed the global hunger index, right? Then COVID-19 has also disrupted the education system, and with that it has also affected access to nutritious food because children could not get the midday meals and the school meals, right? Then she says that there is also need for gendered analysis, and WHO has been pointing the importance of gendered analysis and gender responsive public health policies. But the problem is that there is lack of availability of data that is disaggregated by sex and age. So that is the problem for this analysis. Then she tells us that there has been disruption in health services. Over 70% of countries reported partial or complete disruption of immunization services. And then there have been other problems like contraception, family planning, cancer diagnosis, antenatal care, and so on, as well as emergency surgery. So all these have been rendered useless or they have been stalled because of COVID-19. Then there has also been a push towards extreme poverty. She says that already out-of-pocket payments cause about 100 million people to fall into extreme poverty every year. Now see, these are important figures, you can quote them anywhere. And about 800 million globally spend more than 10% of their household budget on healthcare. Now because of pandemic, because of demand-supply mismatch, the cost of healthcare would also go up, right? So more and more people would be pushed towards extreme poverty. For example, we saw how around 100 million girls and women could be pushed into extreme poverty because of COVID-19. Then she talks about the effective coverage index. Now it talks about outcomes, right? It does not talk about just the quantity, but the quality of health services. It looks at provisions and efficacy of services, and that talks about outcomes. See, there's two things, output and outcome. Now, what is the difference? For example, in a class, there are 10 students and 9 students pass out of 10. So output is 90%. But if we look at it, that out of these 9 students, how many students actually know what was taught, right? How many could actually read, write, or do the numeracy problems that were taught in the class? And if we were to find that it was only 4 people, then the real output or outcome is only 40%, which is a dismal figure. So it is more important to focus on outcomes rather than outputs. So this effective coverage index talks about health outcomes. It enables us to move away from just measuring processes towards measuring outcomes, and that is the most important part. This metric suggested that 3.1 billion people worldwide would still not be covered if we continue to do what we are doing. So this is a very dangerous thing, right? So we need to change our processes. Many countries do not have data systems to be able to accurately measure both mortality and incidence of certain diseases. And that is true. More so in the case of COVID, many hospitals or many state governments or many countries have been writing off deaths as due to other causes, not COVID, just to keep their record low. So she says that India needs to invest more in this vital registration system. Now, what can we do better? Very, very important, because you can use this in your mains answer. Number one, see, because who knows in future there might be wars or other pandemics. So this is the lesson that we need to learn from COVID-19 to implement in our policy structures. So number one, move to digital technology, especially using platforms to provide telemedicines. So she gives examples of platforms like Echo, which have been used by states to train healthcare workers, and government's e-Sanjeevani platform that is enabling telemedicine appointments. So telemedicine is taking up a big way during this pandemic, right? Then number two, move towards electronic and portable health records, because records are very important. Because of records, we can go for data analysis, and 21st century is all about data. So there should be new ways of collecting, using and sharing data, enabling local contextualized decision making. Then number three, working with private sector, which is already playing a very big role in technology, right? She gives an example of Arvind Eye Hospital in Puducherry, which has helped a lot by its shared appointments structure. Then next, further integrate social protection systems, food systems and health systems in order to really have an impact on nutrition, because we have seen that during this pandemic, health, food and the social protection, they are all intertwined, and the problem in one leads to the problem in other. So it is very important. If you're not getting proper food, you would not be healthy. If you're not healthy, you would be more susceptible to falling prey to diseases. And what ensures that you get good food system? A good social protection system, for example, PDS and other outreach to vulnerable sections. So this is the connection. Then managing the infodemic, we have discussed, and she only told us what is infodemic, too much of information and wrong information. Now she says to manage that is not straightforward, because this is linked to people's beliefs and behavior. So we need to set up a behavioral insight group to provide advice on behavior change. So this is more about behavior change. Then addressing the risk factors and social and environmental determinants of health. See, because of climate change and global warming, we are facing more and more diseases, and pandemics are going to happen in future because of climate change, global warming. So she's saying that we should focus on these things so that next time the probability of getting diseases or pandemics is less. So she says, such as quality of water and air that impact our health. For example, we've been discussing air pollution. Now she says investments here are much more difficult as they lie outside the health sector. So at times it becomes difficult for the policymakers to see the connection, but there are very strong interlinkages between the two. And then empowering our frontline health workers. This is also very important. They should have the tools they need. They should receive regular trainings and mentoring, and they should be paid well. We are seeing how in different hospitals, the doctors are going on strikes, especially on the government side. The doctors are going on strike because they are not getting paid. So that really takes away their motivation to work. They are, as it is, risking their lives to work and to serve people, and they are not getting paid. So that is a very wrong thing. Then finally, invest in strong institutional mechanism and capacities in a regulatory body, research centers and public health institutions. Now, this is a standard wording used in international organizations or when it comes to administration, that you should have institutional mechanism, capacity building, regulatory bodies, research center. Doesn't mean much. It is just bureaucratic language, right? So these are the solutions that she has given. So these solutions are very, very important because they are relevant not just for this year, but next year and next to next year, because this is an ever-growing problem, right? Then the magic of myth making, a good analysis of the advertisement and the latest Tanishq controversy. So she's not getting into that controversy per se, but she's talking about the role of advertising within the society, and she makes very interesting points. So just some selected points that we are going to discuss. So first, some statements by some historians and some prominent people. First, she talks about social historian Daniel Borstein, who said in 1960s that advertising is the most characteristic and remunerative form of American literature. Then Marshall McLuhan, he ranked advertising among the 20th century's greatest art forms. So see, you can use such things for your answer writing. Mains, for example, analysis of advertisement or the impact of advertisement on society. There could be a question like that, or in essay, it could be an essay topic as well. And especially if you're a sociology student, such topics are very, very important. Now she makes some beautiful arguments. So again, a statement by Roland Barthes. He called advertising the supreme myth maker of our age and adds the closest modern approximation to ancient myths. So now she's talking about how ads basically shape our popular culture. Now she gives an example when Nike uses Serena Williams to relate the story of women in sports. it isn't just selling sports shoes, but it's selling the myth. And basically, it's the lifestyle or the myth or the aspiration that these brands sell through advertisement, right? And not the product itself. Of the women's empowerment, the social condition that lets women play sports and buy sports shoes. So this is more about aspirational value. In fact, there have been studies in sociology that have said that since 1980s, these big corporations, they haven't really made any good products, but they have created excellent advertisement campaigns, and through that they have been able to sell aspirations, right? So that's what she's also saying. She says that by selling at this subliminal level, advertising insinuates itself into everyday customs and it defines social constructs. For example, modern men load washing machines. For example, if you must have remembered, there was an advertisement where a mother teaches her son to wash clothes, right? The son was making fun of the sister that she isn't able to wash clothes. Then she taught her son to wash clothes. And the message was that there should not be any gender specific role, right? So this is what is happening. Similarly, when women who don't know how to cook and they order on Swiggy or any food app, so these are attempts at normalizing what is happening in the society. Now getting to the Tanishq ad, without saying much, she says that less than 3% of marriages in India are interreligious, and this figure is unlikely to change dramatically anytime soon. And that is very, very true. You forget interreligious, there are so many caste considerations, unfortunately, in our society. What to do with it, right? But by depicting an interreligious marriage, advertising creates a certain desirable myth that is what society is not, but what it could be in future. For example, she talks about Myntra, which featured a lesbian couple in its 2015 ad, and it tried to normalize that. They were also like normal so-called heterosexual couples and leading their life in the normal way. Again, this is an aspirational value that they're trying to portray through the ad. Now she says, as a society gets more secularized and modernized, we begin to seek our moral markers from places other than religion. Very, very true, right? Cultural studies scholar again, Judith Williamson said, advertising has a function which I believe in many ways replaces that traditionally fulfilled by art and religion. So the function that was performed by art and religion in yesteryears is being replaced by advertisement. It creates meaning. This meaning making is not optional but intrinsic to advertising. She gives example of Amul Girl. So as we consume, we subconsciously also seek reflections that let us reimagine ourselves and the world we inhabit through the lens of ads. So this is all that you need to know about this. Very good analysis about advertisements, good statements and good examples. So if you're preparing for sociology or even for your GS1 paper 1 social issues, good. And also for your essay, right? Then women at the heart of recovery. Now this is basically talking about how this pandemic has given us chance to rebuild our economies and our society. So this article is talking about that this recovery is offering India two golden opportunities. One is to build climate resilience and two, to meaningfully address long-standing gender equality issues, right? So the new models that we are going to adopt, they should be both climate friendly and resilient, and also they should have meaningful gender equality provisions. Now she says that there are greater demands of unpaid care work during the pandemic, which is true, and the rising reports of violence we have already seen. Now, according to India Voluntary National Review 2020, women labor force participation rate for 15 to 59 age group is showing a decline trend and stands at 25.3. Remember, in the editorial also we discussed similar things, right? This is one of the lowest rates in the world. Meanwhile, the IMF estimates that equal participation of women in the workforce will increase India's GDP by 27%. So this is very important issue. So we need to get more and more women into the workforce, even if you don't believe in gender equality, at least for the sake of our GDP. The Indian government has invested nearly 22.5 billion in COVID-19 recovery. Then we'll just discuss the important points, right? Women, particularly those from indigenous and marginalized communities, play a significant yet unsung role in various sectors. Again, important figures. Comprising more than 50% of agricultural labor force and nearly 14% of all entrepreneurs, women's relationship with environment and informal economy can be a useful lever of action to transform the lives and livelihoods of their families and communities. So it is not just women who will be empowered, their families and communities, their lives would also be transformed once we give opportunities and women their due right. Now, equipping women with skills. So there are some examples. For example, Disha, a UNDP initiative supported by IKEA Foundation. See, these are the examples that you can quote. Again, I'm telling you, has reached 1 million women and girls with skills and livelihood opportunities. This initiative has shown the benefits of investing in local jobs for women and vulnerable communities. So this one is about Disha, right? The second one is an initiative by Self-Employed Women's Association and the Electronic Sector Skill Council of India and supported by UNEP. Now they are training young rural women to develop a cadre of 15,000 solar technicians for the maintenance of solar pumps in remote locations. And if you remember previous video on 25th one, we discussed the Suryodaya Yojana in Gujarat, where solar power will be used for providing power for pumps in fields in Gujarat, right? Now, similar schemes could be implemented in other place. So the more we adapt this solar module or solar power, there would be need for technicians. So this need, especially in the remote regions, could be fulfilled by such a cadre. So again, a very good initiative. So these are the two examples from this. The Asian Development Bank projects that India's GDP growth rate will rebound to 8% in 21-22. Putting women at the heart of this recovery will make it faster, just and inclusive. So this is about this editorial. Then page 10, Army to review border situation. So basically this is going to be a long winter. So we are going to review the readiness for winter deployment, human resource reforms that are going to take place in this army conclave that is going to happen. China has deployed close to 50,000 troops along the LAC, which has been matched by India. And with no breakthrough in talks for disengagement, both sides have made preparations for deployment in high altitude in the harsh winters. Then Supreme Court keeps local community appointments in abeyance because Government of India has assured that they will be forming new laws to deal with stubble burning, right? Then small news, first seaplane service set to be launched soon. So this will be country's first seaplane service in Gujarat between Sabarmati riverfront in Ahmedabad and Statue of Unity near Narmada. They will be running a 19-seater seaplane and it will fly 4 times a day. The cost would be around rupees 4,800 per passenger. This is for your GS paper 3, right? Regional connectivity, you can use it there. Then you can use this news in paper 1 as an example of changing gender roles. Now, single male parent can take childcare leave. So, male government employees who are single parents will now be entitled to childcare leave. The leave could be granted at 100% of leave salary for the first 365 days and 80% of leave salary for the next 365 days. So, very good initiative by government. It is very sensitive because there would be many single male parent who are government servants, but because of service conditions, they don't get paid leave. So, now a good initiative by government. And so a very good initiative by UP administration. Let us look at it. Polio networks helped curb COVID-19 as per WHO. So let us see what they did right. UP used polio micro plans twice in the last 3 months to identify over 2 lakh people with COVID-19 symptoms. Again, you can use this in paper 3, healthcare system, how you can use existing healthcare models to deal with new problems like pandemics. So here they have used polio micro plans to deal with COVID-19 problem. So these persons were then followed up and tested for COVID-19. What they did, the surveillance medical officers team coordinated with state government. Then they went for massive house-to-house surveillance to identify people with symptoms of influenza-like illness and comorbidities. Then they conducted tests on them. So that is how they identified people. First, they identified symptomatic people or people who could be diseased, and then they conducted tests on them. So this is a very beautiful example of how you can use existing networks to deal with COVID. This covered 208 million people across all 75 districts. So very good initiative by the UP administration. Now they are saying that in the coming months, polio networks with their vast knowledge on vaccination and tools and strategies tailored to reach the unreached and the most vulnerable could play a critical role for COVID-19 vaccination rollout. If you remember, Prime Minister said that we have to prepare ourselves on the lines of elections, and we also saw we have discussed twice or thrice the models that we are going to implement for dealing with the vaccination distribution once it comes out, right? So we could also use this polio network, and this is being implemented not only in UP but in many South Asian countries. So good initiative. Then observe due diligence in probe railway board. So nothing more, even if you miss it, I'll just give you a brief about it, that there was some vigilance inquiry against an officer and his name was unnecessarily dragged in the report, and later on it was found that it was erroneously included. Then now the board has given SOPs to the whole department that you have to be very judicious while you're doing your probes. Now page 13, world. China's Communist Party holds key policy conclave, plenum to chalk out economic policies for the next 5 years. So now again they are meeting, and these crazy people. I'm not talking about the Chinese people in general, just the Communist Party of China, right? So they are going to have discussions about the 14th 5-year plan 2021 to 2025, and they'll also be discussing a longer term vision 2035. This meeting is known as plenum, where all the major functionaries of the Communist Party would be present. Now it is expected that 3 themes are to be in focus. First is about dual circulation model, which means that placing greater emphasis on self-reliance and domestic market as a driver of growth, because China is being kicked out from around the world, right? So they are wanting to focus on their internal growth while striking a better balance with external demand. Then the next is the Chinese rising debt problem, right? This is a very big concern. According to forecasts by UBS, China's debt to GDP ratio is expected to rise by 25 percentage points to 300% of its GDP this year because of its recent measures. And the third is they are also expected to highlight more balanced growth with a focus on greener development. If you remember, we have discussed earlier that Mr. Xi, he promised UNGA that China would go carbon neutral by 2060. So how to go about that? China will be discussing that, and China will need to reduce the share of coal in its energy mix from 58% as of 2019 to less than 50% by 2025. So this is what they're going to discuss. Then Chileans vote for new constitution. So there was a regime change, and now they are going to vote for a new constitution which would be more reflective of the people's demands. 78.28% back reform aimed at expanding the role of state in providing welfare. So it was an extremely capitalist and oppressive regime. Now socialists have come to power, so they'll be changing the constitution. Now Erdogan for boycott of goods amid Moroccan row. So this person Erdogan, he's trying to get his nose everywhere where it does not belong. So now he's talking about France. These people, they never criticize any terrorist attack, but they are the first ones to basically dissuade anything that is happening in reaction to those attacks. So we've already discussed what happened, that in France, an 18-year-old terrorist, he beheaded a teacher named Patty because he showed his students the Charlie Hebdo cartoons as part of its curriculum on free speech, and he used to do that for quite some time. So France is making changes, and like I told you, this is going to get very, very big because Europe is facing problems. See, problem is not religion. Problem is never the religion. Problem is the kind of values that have been imbibed in the people. Now these migrants, when they're coming to these European countries, they're not adapting to European lifestyles. They want to convert Europe into the region from where they came from. Then what is the point of migrating to Europe? You should have stayed in your own country. So this is what the problem is. And you see in coming days, Europe is going to have to take radical steps. So this Erdogan joint calls for boycott of French goods, ramping up standoff between France and Muslim countries over Islam and freedom of speech. French goods have already been pulled from supermarket shelves in Qatar and Kuwait, among other Gulf states. The October 16 beheading of high school teacher Samuel Paty by Chechen terrorists caused deep shock in Europe. Free speech versus fanaticism. In the aftermath of Paty's murder, Mr. Macron issued a passionate defense of free speech and France's secular values, and they're going to bring a new law, vowing to that the country will not give up cartoons, and as a matter of fact, they put the cartoons on a government building. European leaders backing France. As the backlash over France's reaction widened, European leaders rallied behind Mr. Macron. Then page number 14, responsible fuel pricing needed, says the PM. So he highlighted 7 key drivers of change on India's energy map. The PM highlighted them at Indian Energy Forum at CERAWeek. What are those? Accelerating efforts towards gas-based economy that is somewhat cleaner than coal. Cleaner use of fossil fuels, particularly petroleum and coal. Then greater reliance on domestic sources to drive biofuels. Achieving the renewable energy target of 450 gigawatt by 2030. Earlier it was 175, now it has been upgraded to 450 gigawatts. Increasing the contribution of electricity to decarbonize mobility, that means e-vehicles, right? Then moving into emerging fuels, including hydrogen and digital innovation across all energy systems. So these are the 7 key points that are going to lead India's transformation in terms of energy. So you should know these 7 points. These you can consider them as 7 pillars of our energy transformation. India currently has an installed renewable energy capacity of around 88 gigawatts. So that is all you need to know from that article. Now the Indian Express, again just the headlines, 2+2 today. It is going to happen. Stubble burning, we've already discussed. Once target of mass hunting in Northeast, bird of God are now rare symbols of hope. So this is about Amur falcon, and this bird was being ruthlessly hunted down in the northeastern region, especially in Nagaland and Manipur. So it was such a bad situation that exactly 8 years ago, there were reports of around 1 lakh Amur falcons being hunted every day. Just imagine, every day in Nagaland's Vokha district. Now why? Because these birds were being sold in the market for their meat, and each bird would fetch around 25 to 30 rupees, and a hunter would gain around rupees 50,000 in a season. So that brought a lot of bad publicity for India as well, right? Now these are birds with one of the longest migratory routes from Siberia to Africa. But this report prompted the central government, state government and wildlife experts to launch a desperate conservation project. Now this is a beautiful example of how you can go for conservation projects by involving local communities. So what they did, they involved the local communities, they involved the churches, right? And they involved the community elders to basically make people aware of the importance of these birds and to induce them to stop hunting them. And what happened, once they started implementing this, they started getting international recognition, which prompted people more to go for this conservation. And as a result of this conservation, more and more tourists came in, and that gave a fillip to local economy in terms of tourism. So that really acted as an incentive for these people to conserve the birds. And this project has been so successful now that government is thinking of extending it to neighboring states, to Assam, Mizoram and Tripura. Now from their breeding grounds in Siberia and northern China, these falcons migrate west across the Arabian Sea to southern Africa, where they spend the winters. So India is a temporary halt in between. But for a period of about 10 years, during their brief stopover, around 15,000 birds were being harvested every day in Vokha. Sometimes experts say the number went up to 1 lakh a day. Now problem, what happened, that there was a Doyang reservoir that came up in 2002, and then the birds started roosting in millions. So see, this is unintended consequences. They made a reservoir which prompted birds to roost in millions, and this open field, it provided an opportunity for hunters. So what the Wildlife Institute of India, the government and NGOs did was to convince the church, the village council and student leaders. They started getting international recognition, spurred them on. Now there are eco clubs in every school that talk about conservation and biodiversity. We started with receiving domestic and international tourists, and homestays and eateries sprung up. Now the elders were also included. They said that these birds were called Ra Rui or birds of God. We reminded our people of our ancestral belief and explained how important the birds were for the biodiversity of the area. The church pointed out that conservation of wildlife was also mentioned in the Bible. The project was launched in Nagaland in 2013 and has extended to Manipur 3 years later. The Wildlife Institute of India chipped in with staggered satellite tagging project. So see, this is the very good example, again I'm telling you, of conservation projects. You can quote this in your paper 3 GS, environmental conservation. Similar successes could be replicated for conservation of other species as well. Then page number 7, again just the headline. India has stakes in Afghanistan's stability, cross-border terror completely unacceptable. This is what Pompeo is saying. But then again, Americans are very double standard people when it comes to Afghanistan and their own interests. So let this 2+2 happen. Let the results come out and then we'll discuss in detail. Now this explainer, what next in Future-Reliance versus Amazon. So first of all, let us understand what happened, right? What the deal is all about and why Amazon is not happy with this deal. So the Future Group, the Future Coupon Group, which owns companies like Big Bazaar, Food Hall, etc., it signed a deal with Reliance to sell off its business to Reliance, right? But Amazon objected to this. It asked them to halt this. They did not listen. So Amazon approached the Singapore International Arbitration Center. Why? Because when Amazon and Future Group, they had a deal, 2000 crore rupees deal, under which Amazon acquired 49% in this Future Retail or Future Coupon. So that deal had a clause that if they have a problem, they can approach the Singapore International Arbitration Center. Now, the details of the deals, I will tell you from the article from yesterday. So what happened as part of the deal, Kishore Biyani-led Future Retail will sell its supermarket chain Big Bazaar Premium Food Supply Unit Food Hall and Fashion and Clothes Supermarket Brand Factories Retail and Wholesale Units to Mukesh Ambani owned Reliance Retail. So they will be selling off their big businesses to them. However, Amazon has claimed that it has contractual rights had been violated. Last year, Future Retail had signed a 2000 crore deal for Amazon to acquire 49% in Future Coupons, like I told you, the promoter firm of Future Retail. Now, according to Amazon, please pay attention that the deal also gave it a call option, which meant that it had the option of acquiring all or part of Future Retail's shareholding in the company within 3 to 10 years of agreement. So this is what Amazon is saying. It said the deal also required Future Group to inform Amazon before entering into any sale agreement with third parties. So that is what the problem is for Amazon. That number one, Amazon says that this deal provided a call option. So Future Group did not honor that. And number two, Future Group should have communicated to Amazon before entering into this deal with Reliance. Now the actual thing we know that in India, there is only one company that can actually give Amazon a run for its money. And that is Reliance, because they also have deep pockets and they have local capabilities and experience way greater than Amazon. So Amazon is afraid that this Reliance company could wipe them out of this market. So that is why they are creating this problem. So what happened then? Now, since Amazon approached this arbitration center, it gave an emergency order of stay of 90 days on this deal. So why did Amazon approach SIAC? Because Amazon and Future Group have under their agreement agreed to refer their disputes to SIAC. Now, how does it work? Typically in a 3-member arbitral tribunal, each party appoints one member and the third is jointly appointed by the two nominees, or if they fail to agree, by arbitral institutions. However, under SIAC rules, parties can move SIAC to appoint an emergency arbitrator for urgent interim relief, even as the process of appointment of main tribunal is underway. So they haven't appointed a main tribunal, it was just an emergency thing. How can this interim award be enforced on parties in India? Now see, under Indian law, they cannot do much because there is no express mechanism for enforcement of the orders of the emergency arbitrator. Typically, the parties voluntarily comply with emergency award because see, they will be going for future contracts as well. So they would want to have their clean reputation. That is why they would honor it. However, if parties don't comply with the order voluntarily, then the party which has won the emergency award, in this case Amazon, can move a high court in India under section 9 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. So this is important. So Amazon can move high court under section 9 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act if Reliance Future does not agree to this order. Can Future challenge the interim award? It cannot challenge that order in India. It has to challenge that order in the tribunal itself, right? However, if a petition is filed in a high court in India under section 9 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, then the Future Group can put forth its objections. Now, why has Singapore become the hub of international arbitration? Because it has garnered a reputation which is neutral and which has a stellar reputation as jurisdiction driven by rule of law with international standards and high integrity. Even India has its own international arbitration center in Mumbai, but in that context of arbitration, it is a recent development. That is why people, they approach Singapore arbitration system. So this is about this deal. Put simply, Reliance bought Big Bazaar, Food Hall, etc. from Future. But a year earlier, Amazon had signed a 2000 crore deal with Future and it bought 49% stakes in it. Now it had a call option which enabled it to buy further shares in it, and Future was also mandated to tell Amazon about any deals. So it did not honor both the things according to Amazon. That is why it approached the SIAC, because their contract had mandated or stipulated that if there is a problem, they would reach SIAC. Then page 14, PM Japan aims for zero emissions carbon neutral society by 2050. So China is going to be by 2060 and Japan is going to be by 2050. Now Poland sees mass protests over abortion bill. So there was a appeal in the constitutional court regarding the right to abortion for children who have birth or gender defects, but the court has rejected it, and that is a huge blow to women's rights. A constitutional court decision outlining abortions due to fetal defects has now triggered 4 days of demonstration. The ruling ended the most common of a few legal grounds left for abortion in Poland and set the predominantly Catholic country further apart from European mainstream. Pak summons French envoy as anger mounts. Protests in Bangladesh. Boycott calls in Turkey. Gulf over Islamophobia in France. So now this person, he also has the guts to challenge France, and they have started a new rant now that France is Islamophobic. Then moon may hold more frozen water than previously suspected. So there was a pair of studies in the journal Nature Astronomy, and it has put new light to the availability of water on lunar surface. It says that more than 40,000 square kilometers of lunar terrain have the capacity to trap water in the form of ice. That is 20% more than previous estimates. So this is much more than what they had previously estimated. These ice-rich areas are near moon's north and south poles, and temperatures are so low that these regions are called cold traps. So this is important. Cold traps, low temperature in the range of minus 163 degrees Celsius, that they could hold on to water for millions or even billions of years. So there's much more water on the moon. Now, why this is relevant? Because different countries are planning lunar missions, and there are plans for launching lunar bases, and for that there would be need for water. So such sources could be harvested. That is for future. Now they use data from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. The researchers identified cold traps as small as few meters across and as wide as 30 kilometers and more, and used computer models to get all the way down to micrometer in size. So again, a very important news for all those geeks who are interested in astronomy and science and tech. So moon could have much more water than earlier predicted. Then Chileans vote by big margin to tear up Pinochet's constitution. So he was the earlier president, and there were problems with the constitution. We already discussed in the Hindu right now that it was very oppressive, right? And it was very capitalist, did not provide for any reforms or support. So now they are calling for new constitution. So the call for a new constitution that came up during last year's mass protests was call for the country to move in a different direction and offer more equal rights to healthcare, education and pensions, because these were not available. The current constitution, drafted under the dictatorship of Pinochet, was widely seen as a charter that blocked substantial change and maintained a link with grim period in Chile's history. Now see, very interesting figure this is, that 4/5 of the voters said they wanted the charter to be drafted by a specially re-elected body of citizens made up of an equal number, see, very beautiful, equal number of men and women over a mixed convention of lawmakers and citizens. Members of the Constitutional Convention will be voted by April 2021. Then future to move Delhi High Court on Singapore Tribunal order against Reliance deal. Just now we discussed. Then PM amid projected fall in global energy demand, India set to nearly double consumption. This is the same thing, only the 7 pillars of India's energy transformation that I told you. Significance of Pandya's clenched fists. So this is basically taking a bow, and this is in support of or in solidarity to Black Lives Matter movement, which is an anti-racist movement. This all started when an African American man, George Floyd, was killed by an on-duty white officer in Minneapolis in the US, right? So many other sports formats have been protesting against this in similar gesture, taking a knee. In cricket, this started in the West Indies versus England series, right? In the IPL, he's the first person to do so. So you should know about Black Lives Matter. So folks, that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel. Also press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new videos, and please give us a thumbs up if you liked our videos. Also connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for everyone, and please connect with us on our Telegram page where you can access the PDFs of the videos that I'll be posting daily, right? So see you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe and have a great day. Namaste and Jai Hind.